Hello. We're looking at a murder tonight. It happened in Liverpool, but it's famous around the world. There are about 600 murders a year in the UK at the moment, and each one's a tragedy for the people involved. But for the public in general, there's something you might see on the news, but then they fade from memory. But this one hasn't. It's inspired newspaper articles and books and films. It made legal history, and getting on for 100 years later, here we are still talking about it. Why is that then? Why this one and not all the others? I think this one has and this sounds horrible, but a quote-unquote good story. Almost like a TV drama or a whodunit. And it's ambiguous. Everything that seems to prove one thing also proves another thing. So there's stuff for people to argue about and write about. And I think above all because it's got the reputation for being impossible. Not like Jack the Ripper, where there's a gigantic number of potential suspects and no real evidence. Not like that. No, not like that at all. But we mustn't forget that at the centre of all of this, there's a death. On the 20th of January 1931, Julia Wallace was beaten to death in their own home, down there in Wolverton Street. Her husband, William, came home to find her lying on the floor in the front room. There were no broken windows and no forced doors. There was no sign of a struggle. Julia was lying on the hearthrug, and she was fully clothed. There was a crumpled up mackintosh by her right shoulder. The lower left corner of the mackintosh was partially burnt. There had been a crushing blow to the left side of Julia's head. There were pools of blood on the floor and blood spatter on the walls. But there was no sign of any blood at all anywhere else in the rest of the house, except for one speck of blood found on the rim of an upstairs toilet. It was 3/16 of an inch in diameter, that's 4.8 millimeters, and there was no sign of a murder weapon. 13 days later, William was arrested and charged with Julia's murder. Murder was a capital offence in those days and carried the death penalty. Yes, the UK still had the death penalty in 1931. It didn't go away properly until 1998. But if Julia was already dead when William came home, William can't have murdered Julia. It's impossible. He had been out. The police asked him where he'd been, and his answer is long, unlikely sounding, and overly complicated. On the day before the murder, 7:15 in the evening, William goes out to play chess. He's a member of the Liverpool Central Chess Club, and they played here at Cottle City Cafe, number 24, North John Street, Liverpool. The chess club would put up a list of fixtures at the start of each season. They were on public display in the cafe where everybody and anybody could see them. That night, William was due to play a bloke called Chandler. The matches were supposed to start by 7:30, but by 7:45 there was no sign of Chandler, and William ended up playing another bloke called McCartney. They started their game, but they were interrupted. The club captain wanted a word with William. Someone had been on the phone looking for him. His name was R.M. Qualtrough. He wants to see you tomorrow evening at 7:30. He says it's something in the nature of your business. His address is 25 Menlove Gardens East, Mossley Hill. William noted all of this in his diary and got back to his game. So there we are. That's where William was when Julia was killed. He was at 25 Menlove Gardens East doing some business with Mr. R.M. Qualtrough. Except, of course, he wasn't. The unlikely sounding series of events is not over. The next day, the day of Julia's death, he says he left the house at 7:15 and walked to the corner of Belmont Road and West Derby Road. He caught the tram at 18:54, heading towards Lodge Lane, which is that way. While we're doing this, there's some stuff worth mentioning. When Qualtrough was on the phone with Beattie, he said he wanted to talk to William about something in the nature of his business. So what's his business? Mr. Wallace was an insurance salesman for the Prudential Insurance Company. The Prudential would employ salesmen to go to their customers' homes to collect money and sell products and what have you. If you were one of these men, you were known as the man from the Prue. People might know Julia's death as the man from the Prue murder. Each man from the Prue had their own round. William's round was in Club Moor. Wallace's had lived there before they moved to Anfield, and William's round was still there. He'd travel to Club Moor each morning and each afternoon to see his clients. Given that his round is in Club Moor, what William's doing now is already out of the ordinary. He works an established patch in Club Moor every morning and every afternoon. But here he is suddenly going to a new customer in Mossley Hill in the evening. That stands out as unusual, but the fact that it happens on the same night that somebody kills Julia is a big coincidence. If you're prosecuting, you might wonder if William's going out of his way to prove that he was miles from home when Julia was killed. If you were defending, you might claim that someone was trying to get William out of the house so they could get to Julia. Right, here we are at the corner of Lodge Lane and Smithdown Road. From here, William catches another tram towards Penny Lane, with the shelter in the middle of the roundabout. Now from here, his police statement says that he caught a third tram up Menlove Avenue West, looking for Menlove Avenue East. And so we're going to stop for a moment because that's just weird. That bit about Menlove Avenue West is from a police statement from the day after Julia died. It says, "I then boarded another car up Menlove Avenue West, looking for 25 Menlove Avenue East, where I have an appointment with Mr. A.M. Qualtrough for 7:30 p.m. And that's not right. Firstly, there is no Menlove Avenue West or East. It's just Menlove Avenue from one end all the way to the other. And secondly, he didn't have an appointment at 25 Menlove Avenue East. He had an appointment at 25 Menlove Gardens East. And thirdly, Mr. Qualtrough's initials aren't AM, they're RM. Now this is taken from a police statement, but it's worth noting that the statement wasn't made in William's presence and he had no opportunity to see it or to correct it. He didn't sign it as a true record of what he'd said. The statement was written up after the event by a policeman from memory. Now whether these mistakes here, the avenues instead of the gardens, whether that's the policeman who's just got it mixed up, or whether William got it wrong and the policeman wrote it down faithful compared to what William said, we don't know. Anyway, it's muddy and it's confusing and it's going to get worse. The tram puts William off at Menlove Gardens West, and he starts walking, looking for Mr. Qualtrough's house, but he can't find it. He can find Menlove Gardens West and North and South, but he can't find Menlove Gardens East. He thought there might have been a mistake with the address, and so he tried Menlove Gardens West, but nobody there knew anything about a Mr. Qualtrough. William bumped into a policeman on Green Lane, and the policeman tells him there's no such address as 25 Menlove Gardens East. William leaves the policeman and goes to the post office on Allison Road. He wants to look Qualtrough up in the directory, but they didn't have one. So we tried the newsagents a bit further down. They did have a directory, but there was no sign of a Mr. Qualtrough living anywhere in the Mossley Hill area. By then it was 8 o'clock and William gave up and caught the tram home. Okay, so there's a Menlove Gardens West and South and North, but no Menlove Gardens East. How does that work? It's easy. Menlove Gardens is a triangle. The garden itself is in the middle with grass and trees, and the houses are arranged around the edge overlooking the grass. So there are only houses on one side of the road. Usually all odd numbers are on one side of the street and all the even ones are on the other. But in Menlo Gardens that doesn't work because all of the houses are on the same side of the street. William thought that the east might have been wrong, so he tried west, but no one knew what he was talking about. And it can't be north or south because he needs number 25, and on north and south all of the numbers are even. So if the number's wrong, and if the west is wrong, then what's to say that the Menlove or the Gardens is right? These days, Menlove Avenue, Green Lane, Menlove Gardens, etc., it's all nice houses and mature trees. It looks like it's been there forever. But when William went in 1931, it was all pretty new. Looking at old OS maps for 1923, that's only 8 years before Julia was killed. The gardens aren't there at all. So when William took his tram ride to Menlove Gardens, it wasn't a well-established part of the city. He was looking at houses that were only a few years old. So could it be that whoever sent him there knew that the address would sound plausible? Menlove Avenue is a well-known road. Sometimes people just say Menlove, meaning Menlove Avenue. Does that mean that Menlove Gardens East is plausible enough for people to think they know whereabouts it's going to be without it actually existing? Don't know. Right, look, here's our stuff. When we last saw William, he was catching a tram from Allison Road. He arrived home about 9:15. And the oddness continued. You see, when he got back, he couldn't get into the house. He put his key in the front door, but it wouldn't open. He says he knocked gently, but got no response. So he went round to the back of the house. The door from the alleyway into the backyard was closed, but it wasn't bolted, so he could get into the yard. But he found he couldn't get from the yard into the house. That back kitchen door was known to stick sometimes, so William wasn't sure whether or not it was just stuck or if it was bolted. But for whatever reason, William couldn't get into the house. William went back around to the front of the house. At the front door, he tried again. His key would go into the lock and it would turn, but the door didn't open. William now rushes to the back of the house again, where he sees his neighbours, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. He asks them, "Have you heard any suspicious noises in my house during the past hour or so?" Mrs. Johnson said that she hadn't, and Mr. Johnson suggested that they wait while William tried again. With the Johnsons watching, William tried the back kitchen door again and found, quote, that it opened quite easily. William then searched the house while the Johnsons waited outside. In the kitchen, he found a box of photographic equipment had been broken open. Upstairs, in the middle bedroom, all was well. The bathroom was as it usually was. The back bedroom was undisturbed. In the front bedroom, he found the bed upset, the clothes being off. He then came back downstairs and looked into the front room. He struck a match and saw Julia lying on the floor. "I felt her hand," he said, and concluded that she was dead. So that's William's story. It's long and it's complicated. It's like something out of a dodgy TV drama. And so, of course, when the police go and investigate it, they found that it's all absolutely true. The day before Julia was killed, William really did go to the chess club, and he really did get a phone message. On the evening Julia was killed, William really was wandering around Mossley Hill talking to surprised homeowners and bobbies on the beat and ladies who run post offices. He had been to the newsagents, he had caught trams there, and he had caught trams back. And when he found Julia's body, there were witnesses who saw him not covered in blood when he went into the house, and not covered in blood when he came back out again. So it's true, William couldn't have killed Julia. So who did? Mr. Beattie interrupted William's chess match to pass on a phone message. The message hadn't come directly to Mr. Beattie, it had come to the cafe where a waitress called Gladys Harley picked up the phone. When she heard that it was to do with the chess club, she went to get Mr. Beattie. These days we're used to the police having access to phone records, but in 1931, calls were still connected by hand. The caller would phone the operator and give them the number they wanted. The operator would then plug a wire into a socket by hand to connect the call. There's no automatic call logging, there's no logging of any sort, except when something went wrong. If something went wrong, the operator would call a supervisor, who would then make a note in case somebody complained or some maintenance was needed. When the caller phoned the chess club that night, something went wrong. They weren't connected and they had to call again. Because of that fault, a note was made. The note included the number that the caller was dialing from, the number they wanted, the time of the call, and the nature of the fault. The fault was NR, meaning no reply. The caller wanted Bank 3581, and they were calling from Anfield 1627. We've already seen Bank 3581. It's Cottle's, where the chess club played. So where's Anfield 1627? I started by looking at the trial transcript, thinking it would all be sorted out by then. In the transcript, we hear a barrister talking to a telephone engineer. The barrister wants to establish the whereabouts of Anfield 1627. The gist is as follows. Are you Leslie Heaton? Yes. Are you a telephone engineer? Yes. Is there a telephone box at the junction of Rochester Road and Breckfield Road, Anfield? Yes. Is the phone number Anfield 1627? Yes. All right, then that's clear enough. Breckfield Road is there, and we go along there until we get to Rochester Road. But there is no Rochester Road. I found the photograph of the phone box, but that doesn't show us very much. I looked at police statements. In his statements, Leslie Heaton says Anfield 1627 is connected to a telephone kiosk which is fitted at the junction of Rochester Road and Breck Road, Anfield. Breck Road, not Breckfield Road. Breck Road. We're trying a man for his life here. We could get the names right, couldn't we? Flipping heck. So, Breck Road is there. And you go along there until you find Rochester Road. But there's no Rochester Road. There's Winchester Road, which is a bit like Rochester. What does it all mean? Is it just plain wrong, like Breckfield versus Breck? Is it not Rochester Road at all? Winchester does make sense, because it does sort of meet Breck Road, but it does it just where Breck Road turns into Townsend Avenue. So, and in the picture of Anfield 1627, there are railings and grass, and there aren't there anymore. So maybe it's been built on. I carried on reading police statements, hoping for a clue, when along came Lillian Martha Kelly. In her statement, Lillian says, I am a telephone operator engaged at the Anfield Telephone Exchange. I was on duty on the 19th. About 7:15 p.m. I received a call from 1627 Anfield, a call box by the Cabbage Hall Picturedrome. Oh, okay, so we're not relying on street names anymore. Cabbage Hall Picturedrome. The Cabbage Hall pub is on Breck Road, but there's no cinema. Google. 212 Lower Breck Road. Opened 1913. Closed 1959. And now it's the LFC Supporters Club. Well, I know where that is. And the phone box was opposite, so let's get a proper map up. Right, there's the Cabbage Hall pub. There's Winchester Road. And the Supporters Club is just here. So 1627 would have been opposite. Oh, right by, yeah, that makes sense. That's the grass in the photograph, isn't it? Okay. Now that could be a lot of faff for nothing. Except there's Anfield 1627. And then if we zoom out, there's Wolverton Street, where William and Julia lived. So we're talking there to there. William says he left the house at 7:15. The operator says the first attempt to get bank 3581 was at 7:15. The call was finally connected at 7:20. William arrived at the chess club about 7:45. So is this evidence of somebody watching William and making a phone call once they know he's out of the house? Or is this evidence of William leaving the house and making a phone call on his way to play chess? Don't know. We heard earlier that William really was in Mossley Hill on the evening Julia died. And we know the Johnsons were there when Julia was found, so William couldn't have killed Julia. Except, of course, it doesn't matter if he went to Mossley Hill. If Julia was already dead when he left the house, he could have gone to Timbuktu. It wouldn't make any difference. It doesn't matter that he went out. It matters what time he went out and what time Julia died. Do we know that? Do we know when Julia died? Time of death. 2 doctors attended the scene that night. The first was John Edward Wheatley McFall, Professor of Forensic Medicine at the University of Liverpool and of Medical Jurisprudence at the Universities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Manchester and Birmingham. The second was Dr. Hugh Pearce, LRPC, MRCS. The professor arrives at 10:10, the doctor at 10:12, and they both took steps to estimate the time of death. They did this by using the onset of rigor mortis. Rigor mortis is the stiffening of the body that can occur after death. The amount of rigor mortis can be used to suggest a likely time of death. They both thought the likely time of death was 6 o'clock. Now, on the night Julia was killed, William said he left the house about 7:15. If we take 6 o'clock as the time of death, he would have had time to kill Julia and clean up before going off to see Mr. Qualtrough. And the professor did say the time of death was 6 o'clock, but he also accepted that rigor mortis only provides an estimate, and the actual time of death could have been anywhere between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. The doctor also thought the likely time of death was 6 o'clock, but gave 2 hours either way, so anywhere from 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock. So the question remains, when did Julia die? Alan Close was 14, and he was the milk boy. His family had a dairy, and Alan delivered the milk, including to the Wallace's house. Elsie Wright, who was 13, also delivered milk for the dairy, and she knew that Alan took milk to the Wallace's. The day after the murder, she asked Alan if he'd seen Mrs. Wallace the previous day, and Alan said yes. What time? Elsie asked. About 7:15, he replied. 7:15. 7:15. That would mean that Julia was still alive when William left the house. So there was no time for him to be killing Julia and tidying up before he went out. Elsie and some other neighbourhood children realised that Alan hadn't told the police what he knew. So they went with him to the Wallace's house, where Alan told 2 plainclothes policemen that he'd seen Julia alive at 7:15 on the day she died. So is this right? Is there anything to back it up? Elsie and Alan were doing their rounds at the same time. Elsie saw Alan a couple of times during her round. She left the dairy at 6:10. She went to Twyford Street. It took her 5 minutes to get there. Her deliveries took another 5 minutes. When she got back to Breck Road, she heard the bells of the Belmont Institute ringing for the 6:30 church service. So, 6:30, she still hasn't seen Alan. Then she went to the Holy Trinity Vicarage. By the time she got there, the bells had stopped. She was at the vicarage for 5 minutes. There's a lot of 5 minutes in this story. She's at the vicarage for 5 minutes. Elsie then passes Alan in Letchworth Street. It was 7:20. He was heading towards Wolverton Street. Now, Elsie knows Alan's rounds. From Letchworth Street, he would go to Richmond Park, Wolverton Street, and Redford Street. So if Elsie saw Alan at 7:20 and he hadn't been to Wolverton Street yet, the whole idea of I saw Mrs. Wallace at 7:15 is making a good deal of sense. And it's not just Elsie. There was Dougie Metcalf, who was 14, Kenneth Caird, who was 14, Harold Jones, who was 14, all of whom heard Alan say 7:15. Now you might worry that they're all quite young and they all seem to know one another. So maybe the story started as nothing and then grew in the telling. But there's Alison Wildman, 16. He wasn't part of these conversations, but he was delivering newspapers the night Julia was killed. He remembers passing Holy Trinity Church at 7:25. From there, it's 2 or 3 minutes to the Wallace's neighbours, not the Johnsons, on the other side. When he got there, the milk boy was waiting at the Wallace's door to get the milk jugs back. Mrs. Johnson says that Alan did deliver milk that evening, but she didn't remember the time. She said, he might come at any time between 6:10 and 7, but recently he had been very late. According to Mr. Johnson, when he got home at about 6:45 p.m, the milk was yet to be delivered, which puts Alan's arrival after 7:15. So all of that makes it sound like Alan Close was the last person to see Julia alive, maybe the next last person to see Julia alive, and he did it at about 7:15. William says he left the house about 6:45. I cannot definitely say whether the milk boy called before I left the house, but I think he did. So had the milk boy called? Let's hear it from the man himself. In his police statement, which is undated, but was presumably made when he went to tell the police what he knew the day after Julia's murder, he says that he delivered milk to Mrs. Wallace between 6:30 and 6:45. But now that's different. Where's the 6:30 come from? In a statement made on the 20th of February, so a month later, he says, I know the accused and his wife. I delivered milk there for about 2 years. Mrs. Wallace took in the milk from me between 6 and 6:30 each day. Well, I'm not sure Mrs. Johnson would agree with that. The last occasion was the 20th of January last at 6:30 p.m. I passed Holy Trinity Church, Breck Road at 6:25 p.m. I noticed the church clock. I then went to the dairy on Sedley Street and on to Wolverton Street. I then gave the milk to Mrs. Wallace at the front door. Alan Close and Alison Wildman both mentioned the Trinity clock, and they both use it to fix their accounts in time. Alison was there at 7:25 and saw Alan at the Wallace's after that, closer to 7:20. Alan says he passed the church 10 minutes earlier and was at the Wallace's for 6:30. What's the clock telling the right time might be a good question. John Patterson, the clockwinder, provided a statement. He checked the clock each Friday. On the Friday before the murder, he attended Holy Trinity where he wound the clock and set the time as it was 2 minutes fast. On the Friday after the murder, he attended again and he wound the clock. This time, he tells us, the clock showed the right time and did not require adjustment. So on the evening in question, the clock was telling the right time. If we accept the timing that most suits the prosecution, William would have had less than quarter of an hour to tidy up and be out the door. Although we keep saying he left at 7:15. How do we know that? Couldn't he have left at 7 or 7:15? In his statements, William always says 1845, but can that be tested? William says he caught a tram at a quarter of Belmont Road and West Derby Road at about 1854. Nobody remembers seeing him there, but when he changes trams at the corner of Roger Lane and Smithdown Road, he talks to the conductor, and the conductor, Thomas Charles Phillips, remembers him. In his first statement, which is undated, Thomas says, at about 7:10 p.m, a man whom I cannot describe joined the car at the junction of Lodge Lane and Smithdown Road. He appeared to be excited and asked me for Menlove Gardens East. I don't think I would know the man again. The tram conductor gave a second statement on the 3rd of March. It's not 7:10 anymore, it's 7:06. The last man to get on the tram asked if the car went to Menlove Gardens East. Today I picked this man out of a number of others at the main Bridewell. I do not know if there is a Menlove Gardens East. I know there is a Menlove Gardens North and South. I judge the Menlove Gardens East would be in that vicinity. Okay, so he was at the corner of Lodge Lane and Smithdown Road at 7:06, 7:10. Great. What time did he leave the house? The police test this. They get policemen to make the journey at the right time of day. They do 6 tests, and they found it takes about 18 minutes to get from William's backyard door to the corner of Smithdown Road and Lodge Lane. So if William left the house at 6:45 and travelled for 18 minutes, he'd get to Smithdown Road at 7:03. He then gets off that tram, walks around the corner, and gets the tram towards Penny Lane, where the conductor sees him at 7:06. It seems a safe assumption that William was telling the truth. He did leave the house at about 6:45. If you accept that Alan Close, the milk boy, saw Julia alive at 6:30, William had only 15 minutes to beat his wife to death, clean up, and go looking for Mr. Qualtrough. The police did not find blood on William's shoes, trousers, shirt, jacket. There was no blood on his hands, there was no blood on his face, there was no blood in his hair. On Wednesday, the 22nd of April, 1931, the case of the King versus William Herbert Wallace was heard here at St George's Hall, Liverpool. The judge was Mr. Justice Wright. Mr. Hammond, KC, led the prosecution. Mr. Oliver, KC, led the defence. The Clerk of Assizes was first to speak. William Herbert Wallace, you are indicted and the charge against you is murder. Is that on the 20th day of January 1931 at Liverpool you murdered Julia Wallace? How speak you, William Herbert Wallace? Are you guilty or not guilty? The prisoner replied not guilty, and the jury was sworn in. A complete stranger in the area. William's alibi depends in large part on people believing that he really was a stranger in the area. The defence will try to support that idea. The prosecution will try to show that it isn't true. We'll hear from the prosecution first as they speak to Mr. Crewe, who was William's supervisor at the Prudential Insurance Company. Your name is Joseph Crewe? Yes. You live on Green Lane, Mossley Hill, Liverpool? Yes. Had the accused visited you there? Yes. Often? Yes. How many times altogether? 5 times. Some time ago, did he suggest anything to you about music? Well, he suggested he would like to play the violin and asked me if I knew anything about it, and I said I knew a little bit. Did you play yourself? Yes, I did, and I went with him to buy one. I asked him who was going to teach him, and he said he didn't know, but he was going to get a teacher, and I said I would give him a few lessons until he got one. You undertook or suggested you should give him a few lessons. That's right. How many lessons altogether did you give him? 5. Did he used to come to your house to get them? He came to my house. Apart from the lessons, did he come at any other time? No. How long ago was this? About 2 years. Mr. Crewe was then cross-examined by the defence. 5 times, 2 years ago, he came to your house for violin lessons. Yes. To get to you, would the best way be the ordinary way, to take the tram that comes along Allison Road and get off at the corner? Get off at Green Lane. So that tram would take him nearly to your door. That tram would not take him within sight of Menlove Gardens, would it? No. Did you, as a matter of fact, know whether there was a Menlove Gardens East or not? Menlove Gardens is behind the main road, and I would suggest very few people, only those that reside in the gardens, ever came through there. Just answer my question. Did you know whether there was such a place or not? No. So was William a complete stranger in the area? He used to go there regularly for music lessons, although it was only 5 times and it was 2 years ago, and where he went wouldn't have put him within sight of Menlove Gardens. prosecution now speak to William. You used to go to Coldstones very often, or fairly often. My wife and I might have gone possibly once a year. Rarely, was it not? No, I do not think so. We generally went about twice a year, the time the roses were out. How used you to get there? Take the car to Lodge Lane and change over. The only route is off Menlove Avenue, is it not? I could not really tell you that. Could you not? No. I put it to you, you can only get to Calderstones by tramcar via Menlove Avenue. No, I could not say definitely. There may be two routes. I really cannot tell you. I do not know. When you went to Calderstones, as your diary shows, used you not to go off Menlove Avenue? We probably did, but I do not know whether there was any other route or not. Did you not know Menlove Avenue quite well? No, I did not. I see here, May the 22nd, 1929, and August the 30th, you go to Calderstones. That's twice in a few months. Yes, quite possible. You didn't know Menlove Avenue quite well. I did not. How did you go to Walton Woods with your wife? Took the car to Smithdown Road corner. I probably inquired of some driver of a car which car would take us there and get on that one. You would find yourself then at Penny Lane Junction. Possibly. You used to go to the Plaza Cinema with Mr. Crewe. No. Never? No. You have never been there. Yes, I have been there, but not with Mr. Crewe. Yes, I have been there with Mr. Crewe. I thought you said you had not. You asked me if I had been to see Mr. Crewe. I will explain. I had been to Mr. Crewe for a music lesson, and he said, I will see you down the road. And as we arrived at the plaza, he said, come over and have a coffee before you go. We went over and had a coffee and came out, and I went home. I did not go into the place. Not into the cinema. No. You did not go into the cinema at all. No, only the restaurant part. Is that called the Plaza too? I suppose so, it's all in one. And then the prosecution read a line from William's diary. After the lesson we went into the Plaza Cinema, a wonderfully well got up place. Yes, quite. Inside. Inside the large hall where you go for coffee or tea or refreshments. You do realise that from the Plaza Cinema, you are only a couple of 100 yards from Menlove Avenue. I know that now, yes. You also know that halfway up Green Lane, which joins Allison Road and Menlove Avenue, lives Mr. Crewe. Yes, I know that, of course. Did it ever occur to you when you were in difficulties that night on the 20th and you couldn't find Menlove Gardens East, just to look in and ask Mr. Crewe where it was? Yes. I knocked on his door, but I could get no answer. When did you do that? That night, I should say it was about 7:47, before you saw the police officer. Immediately preceding that, but you never stated it to anyone until you gave it in evidence today that you called on Mr. Crewe. I think that is in evidence in one of my statements to the police. I will not be positive about it, but I think it is so. I think Inspector Gold would probably have that information. I have looked through them and I cannot find it. I put it to you, you have never said so until today. Of course, you realise now the importance of that point, that you were quite near the superintendent who would know the district well, and you were walking around asking everybody else where it was. Okay, before that day in court, did William ever tell the police that he'd knocked at Mr. Crewe's house? Which would have demonstrated that he was not a complete stranger in the neighbourhood. William may have been thinking of a statement he made, not to the police, but to his own solicitor. In that, he says, I then went to Green Lane, which is quite near, and called at the house of my superintendent, thinking he might know the address. I could not get an answer, and later found he'd been at the pictures. Locks. What William does when he gets back to the house does make sense if he can't get in. The defence will want to give solid reasons why William couldn't get into the house. They'll want to say that the front door was bolted, the back door was somehow stuck. The prosecution will want to show that William could have got in if he'd wanted to, but what he really wanted to do was to hang around outside until he bumped into a witness who could then be present when he discovered the body of his already murdered wife. The first witness we're going to hear from is Mrs. Johnson, and she's being questioned by the prosecution. There was a knock at the door, I understand. Yes. Did you try to open the door? Yes. Were you able to? No, it's a different lock to mine, and I think I was agitated, so I drew back and let Mr. Wallace open it. And the police constable came in. Yes. Later, the defence asks, you went to the door and could not open it? Yes. Then Mr. Wallace opened it? Yes. Do you know whether or not the door was bolted? I do not. If he says he did unbolt it, you would not contradict him, would you? I do not know whether he did. I cannot remember that. And then from the prosecution again. Are you used to a lock like that? No. Have you ever seen one like it? Yes, we had one ourselves until we replaced it with a Yale type. Okay, if that was the defence hoping to introduce evidence to show that the front door was in fact bolted, it may not have gone as well as planned. So if the front door wasn't bolted, was the lock in some way damaged or broken, and that's why William couldn't get the front door open? We're going to hear from a locksmith. Here's the prosecution. They're talking about the lock for the front door. On the 26th of January, you were handed a lock by Chief Inspector Roberts. Yes. Did you examine it? Yes. What did you find? I found that it was dirty and rusty. I took the back off the lock, and on examining the works, I noticed that the little springs that should have pressed the wards down were missing. I also noticed that the wards were stuck in the neutral position. That is, they had been lifted up at some point and remained in that position. Can you tell whether it's been damaged recently, or has it been like that for a long time? In my opinion, it's been in that condition for a long time. I also noticed that the pinhole at the back of the lock is worn, and that the part that's operated by the key is also worn, and that when you insert a key into the lock and turn it, instead of stopping just over halfway, it goes a complete revolution, and that allows the latch to slip back again. It has been like that for some time. Yes. For anybody who knew the lock was like that, it would be perfectly easy to open the front door. Yes. On the 16th of November, how can it be November? Did Inspector Gold hand you another lock? He did. The lock they're talking about now is the lock on the door between the backyard and the back kitchen. Did you examine it? I did. What did you find? I found that the locking bolt was rusty, but in good working order. It was stiff for want of oil. You say that the locking bolt was rusty. Yes, but it was in good working order, and the spring bolt, the crank that actuates the spring bolt, was grinding on the base of the lock, so that when you turned the lock, the spring bolt remained in. It required pressure to open it. Apart from being rusty, there was nothing wrong with it. Nothing else wrong. Was the condition in which you saw it of long-standing or only recent? It was long-standing. The locksmith is then cross-examined by the defence. Is there any means of securing that latch on the inside when it's open? Only by locking the locking bolt. What happens? You insert the key and turn it, and it shoots out the locking bolt, and it must be opened again either from inside or outside with the key. But you cannot secure that latch in any way. No. Is this the position with regard to that? It is exceedingly stiff. A portion of it is stiff. It is very stiff. It is erratic in its operation and sometimes stiffer than its others. It's been like that for some considerable time. I'm sure of it. I want to get this from you. Is it in a condition in which it would sometimes open easier than others? Not always, because the crank is grinding against the back of the lock. Would it always be the same every time you opened it? Yes, in my opinion it would. There are cases, are there not, where latches will open easily and sometimes with great difficulty. Sometimes they feel stiff and sometimes they do not. That would in most cases be due to rust. This lock is rusty, is it not? Yes, it is rusty. The fact that a latch would sometimes open easily and sometimes stick is a possibility with regard to a lock. In this lock, no, because the crank that operates the spring bolt is grinding against the back of the case. To make that work freely, it would need to be eased off by a file. I thought you said it depended on whether it was rusty or not. Not with this particular lock. I've only examined this lock. Does it sometimes depend upon the thing into which it fits? Into the strike of the lock? Yes. Does it depend sometimes on the condition there? Yes, I had one on my own shop door like that, and I had to lift the door to turn the key. Do you know what the position of this door was? No. With regard to the possible grinding effect of rust or anything else on the strike, that might have the effect of making it sometimes difficult and sometimes easy. I do not think so in this case. Why? Because the stiffness is due to the internal workings of this lock. To that extent it is always stiff. Yes. Now, will you add to that the possibility that there may be something wrong with the fit of the strike? I cannot say that because I haven't seen it. That is a thing which will produce difficulty sometimes. I think you've said so. I'm trying to find out, as you know, about these things, and I thought you told me that sometimes the fitting of the latch into the strike is a thing which may produce stiffness by the latch grinding on the strike. That is possible. Is not that a thing which is erratic sometimes, and its operations stiffer than at others? Yes, that may be, but with regards to this lock, I cannot say anything about it. I have not been on the premises. The prosecution then asked a question. So far as that particular lock is concerned, would there be any difficulty for a person who is used to it? No, because they'd know it required a little extra pressure, and they would use that extra pressure. Okay, the doors weren't bolted, and while the condition of the locks wasn't perfect, it shouldn't have stopped William getting in. The prosecution now drives that point home when they speak to Superintendent Moore. What did you look at on the front door? I made an examination as to marks either on the lock or close to the lock. The accused was present. Who else was with you then? Inspector Gold. I asked the accused if he would let me have his latch key. He gave it to me and I put it in the lock. I worked it for a couple of seconds and I found out what was the matter. I went outside, pulled the door to me and locked it, and I opened it at the first attempt. I went in and said, I could open the door all right, but the lock is defective. When you said, I could open the door all right, but the lock is defective, what did he say? It was not like that this morning. Did he ever make any suggestions to you that the door might have been bolted? Never. Neither then nor at any time. Never to me. And you made the trial with the front door key in his presence? Yes. Okay, I think the prosecution are doing a good job of demonstrating that William should have been able to get in through the front door. The lock was defective, but someone who'd never even seen it before managed to open it first go. And the idea that the door was bolted, again, that idea is being undermined. Did he make any suggestions to you that the door might have been bolted? Never. And now the prosecution is going to talk to William. And in the light of earlier evidence, they're going to try and demonstrate that William's account makes no sense. And what's more, they're going to try and show that he changed his account. And so you went home. I went straight home, of course. Both doors were locked. Yes. When you found that the back door wouldn't open, had you been to the front first? Yes. What had been your experience with the lock there? That it had just slipped back and would not open? No, I could not make my key turn at all on the first occasion. Suppose it were bolted. Could you make your key turn? Ordinarily, yes. Then there would be nothing to prevent the key turning. The bolt is in no way connected with the lock. No, you could not make your key turn. That is so. Did you know that your lock was out of order and wanted coaxing? We'd had trouble with it from time to time for quite a long period. It had occasionally got stuck and we'd had to oil it on purpose, but we never had any difficulty in getting in. But occasionally, when you turned too far, the catch slipped back. No, I never had this experience with it. On this occasion, in the front door, you could not turn the key at all. At first, no. I tried it. I got hold of the knob and it wouldn't happen. The bolt would not slip back. Is it your view that the door there was locked or bolted? No, it is not. Not now. I probably thought so at the time, but on considering it, I think I'm wrong in that view, because I think the thing had stuck, as it did on many occasions. It was usual with the back door. As a matter of fact, this is a lock that often stuck. Yes. And now you think that is what it was doing on this occasion. I do. At the time, you thought the back door was locked. I think at that moment I rather had that opinion. When did you cease to have that opinion? I don't know. Do you remember having a long conversation with Superintendent Moore when he showed you how the door worked? I do not remember the conversation, except I knew we did have a conversation. I mean to say, I do not remember the details of the conversation. I know there was a talk. You remember him asking you about the working of that lock? Superintendent Moore and Inspector Gold were together. Did they call you out and ask you for your door key? Yes, I think that is correct. Did Mr. Moore then try the key in the lock? Yes, I think so. And found that the key would turn to a certain point, but if the key were turned too far round, the lock would slip and the door again be locked. Yes, in your presence. Yes, that was my own experience. That had been your experience. On the second occasion on which I went to the door. And on previous occasions? No, as I said before, never. But that happened to you on the second occasion when you went to the door. Yes, on that night. He says he tried the key in the lock and opened the door and entered the house. Then he said to you, I could open the door all right, but the lock is defective, and you said it was not like that this morning. It was not, as far as I could tell you. I had entered the house, or the previous night at about 10:30, when I came home from the chess club and had no difficulty in opening the door. Did you say a word to him about it having been locked, bolted? He has sworn you did not. Did I say what? A word to him about the front door having been bolted. I cannot say whether I did or not. Did you say a word to him about your experiences with the lock the second time you went there being the same as his? I cannot recall it. All you did say to him was, it was not like that this morning. Yes, I think I did. I put it to you that until he pointed out that he knew how the lock was working, you had never suggested that it worked in that way. I may not have suggested it, but I knew that it was so. Now see what you said when it came to your statement on the 20th. This is after he had pointed this out to you. I went back to the front, I tried my key in the front door again, and found the lock did not work properly. The key would turn in it, but would seem to unturn without unlocking the door. I put it to you that in that statement you had merely dictated what you had seen him do that night. No, I simply told the truth. But you had never told him you had had such an experience with the key. I have had a lot of experience with it. I have not been able to tell anybody. And did you tell him that the door was bolted? I cannot remember. You see, I'm putting it to you that neither of these doors was in fact bolted or locked, and this suggestion that they were bolted is purely play acting. You may think so, of course, but you are wrong. And then we move on a little bit to talk about the Johnsons. Did you really think because you could not unlock the doors that something terrible had happened? I did not know what had happened. I simply knew that I could not get in either the front or the back, and that was an unusual circumstance to me. I simply inquired of my neighbours whether they had heard anything unusual. What would have happened if Julia had gone to the post box? I would be in the same position. I would not be able to get in, but chances are she would not have bolted the door. Well, she might. No. You did not know when you saw the Johnsons that Julia had not bolted the back door? No. So this is the position. You're outside there, your wife might have gone to the post box, and you asked the neighbours, have you heard anything unusual? Yes. Mr. Qualtrough. The defence would like to demonstrate that Mr. Qualtrough and the phone call and going to Menlove Gardens was a cunning ruse put together by a malevolent third party to lure William away from the house. The prosecution would like to demonstrate that it's all a bit silly. And here we hear the prosecution talking to William. When Mr. Qualtrough rang up on Monday night, we know he was a few hundred yards from your house. I do not know. You have heard he was at the call box. He was supposed to be there. I do not know. You do not dispute that it was rung up from there. In the face of the evidence, I cannot dispute that. Very well then, you can say yes. He was about 400 yards from your house. Your wife was presumably alone, and as he rang up the cafe, he must have expected you to be there. One must presume that. He might have ascertained that other people expected you to be there. Yes. Otherwise he would not have left a message. Yes. And you were there for 2 hours or more. Yes. An ample opportunity for him to have gone round to your house, is it not? Yes. Only a few minutes away. Yes. And your wife left there alone. Yes. Has anybody ever left a message for you before at the City Cafe? No. Or has anybody ever left such a message for you anywhere? Of that type? No. You never have. I have never received a message like that before in my life. And of course Mr. Qualtrough had no possible means of knowing whether you would receive it that night, because nobody knew for sure that you were going to be at the club. That is so. Then he rang up at 7:15 or 7:20, and without knowing you would ever get the message, and without knowing you would ever go to Menlove Gardens East, apparently he was ready, waiting for your departure the next night. It would look like it. Did it ever occur to you that he would have to watch both doors, front and back? No, it did not. And you've never had a message sent you before? I have not. You must have realised he had not the slightest idea as to whether you got his message or not. Yes. And therefore he never knew you were going to get his message, and in spite of that, off you go to Menlove Gardens East. Yes. Not only could he not know that you would go to Menlove Gardens East, but he could not have known you would not look up in a directory and find that there was no such place. No, he would have to risk all that. Yes. And of course you could have found out at once, if you'd looked it up in a directory, where Menlove Gardens East was, or was not. I could have done. And I suppose the slightest enquiry at the Prudential office would have told you. It would have been the simplest thing in the world to find out through the machinery at the hands of the Prudential whether there was such a place. It was not necessary. Then when you went up to Penny Lane, you know now at the terminus there, you were a very few hundred yards away from Menlove Gardens East. Yes. Did it ever occur to you to ask the policeman on point duty there? No. If you had, you would have learnt at once that it was not there. The tram conductor gave me sufficient evidence to show I had only to take the car on the right route and I would be where I wanted to be. Do you know the conductor says 3 times you told him you wanted to go to Menlo Gardens East? That may be so. And once you told him you were a complete stranger in the district and had important business. Yes. The next conductor says you've asked him about Menlo Gardens East and you told him, I'm a complete stranger around here. Yes. And you know the police constable says how you asked him where Menlo Gardens East was. Yes. And having been told by the police constable that there was no such place, did you then go to the newsagent, Miss Pinches, and did you speak to her about looking for Menlo Gardens East? Yes, I think so. She says you did. Yes. And did you hear from her that there was no such place? I did. As a matter of fact, does it not strike you, looking back on it now, that all of these inquiries were absolutely unnecessary? One simple inquiry of the policeman on point duty would have done it. No, that doesn't strike me at all as being out of the way. Does the whole thing not strike you as very remarkable? That a man who does not know you should ring you up for business in another district and expect you to go there, yet without knowing whether you'd gone there or not, to come and wait outside your house for the chance of murdering your wife. Yes. It is a curious thing, is it not? Yes. If you'd been given the right address, of course, you need not make a number of inquiries. One would have been sufficient. You follow what I mean? Yes. The wrong address is essential to the creation of evidence for the alibi. Do you follow that? No, I do not follow you. If you had been told Menlo Gardens West, the first inquiry would have landed you there. Yes. If you were told of an address which does not exist, you can ask 7 or 8 people, every one of whom would be a witness about where you were. Yes. So, to a man who was planning to do this, a wrong address would be essential to his alibi. Yes. I think that went well for the prosecution. They got William to admit that the supposed cunning scheme was unnecessary. The malevolent third party could simply have waited for William to go to the chess club and then attack Julia. Also, William didn't check the address. Being a man from the Prue, he was better placed than most for checking addresses. And then, to end with, William admitted that he went to Mossley Hill and did all the things he'd have to do if he needed an alibi. Time of death. For the prosecution to make their case against William, they have to deal with a very tight timeline. William must have killed Julia before he left the house at 7:15. The defence will undermine that idea by showing that the medics were not very rigorous in their examinations and by getting the professor to contradict himself. This makes it seem that the medical evidence might not be based on anything very solid. Now, with regard to the time of death, when did you first think the time of death was important? Immediately I examined the body. That was your first thought. It was a thought. One of your first thoughts. I thought, how long has this woman been dead? And that you proceeded to ascertain by a series of observations. First as to rigor mortis, and secondly as to the condition of the exuded blood. The blood is a guide, but not as definite as rigor mortis. You put rigor mortis first, but the other did assist you to form your opinion. It did. How many notes did you take with regard to rigor mortis? Practically none, I think. Can you show me? I do not think that I can. Where did you make them? I made these in the room. I asked you, do you remember, to give me all the notes you made in the room? I have them here. I'm not going to claim any others. Are there any notes on those papers with regard to rigor mortis? There are not. It comes to this, does it not? That you being intent from the start on the importance of rigor mortis as to the time of death have not made one note with regard to rigor mortis. That is so. Your colleague said on another occasion, every quarter of an hour you examine the body for the progress of rigour. Yes, I was constantly observing it. You would agree, would you not, that the progress of rigour from the point of view of crime is important? I mean, the stages that are reached during your observations are important. Very. And not one note made. No, but I know definitely. Let us take the question of rigour. Rigour is a very fallible test as to the time of death. Not in the present case of an ordinary person dying in health. It is a very fallible factor even in healthy people. It is just a little. Not a little, I'm putting very. No, not very fallible. Does it depend, amongst other things, upon the muscularity of the person? It does. And a powerful muscular body will be affected by rigour much more slowly. Yes. Than a feeble and frail body. Yes. Was this a feeble and frail body? Yes, she wasn't exactly frail. She was a feeble woman. You have used the word frail. Yes, she was a weak woman. Frail? Yes, frail. It is your own word? Yes, my own word. Then we may summarise your last two answers, and it comes to this. That she was a woman who was likely to be quickly affected by rigour. No, she would be rather delayed if anything. The judge then intervenes. I thought you said it would be quicker in a frail person and slower in a person of muscularity. She would be delayed. Do you wish to say that a feeble and frail person would have delayed rigour? No. What do you say then? She was in a condition of good health, although a frail woman. Then I will start all over again. A muscular body would take longer to be affected by rigour than a feeble and frail body. Yes. Was this woman a feeble and frail body? Yes. Then she would be likely, would she not, to be more quickly affected by rigour? A little. Then why did you say rather longer just now? Not rather longer than a muscular person. You're not arguing the case, are you? No, I wish to state what I found. You know what's at stake here. I do. Bearing in mind that this feeble and frail woman would be more likely to be affected by rigour, are you going to swear that she was killed more than 3 hours before you saw her? No, I'm not going to swear. I'm going to give an opinion, and I swear that the opinion that I shall give shall be an honest one. Then what is your opinion? My opinion was formed at that time that this woman had been dead about 4 hours. Now that I have reminded you that she, being a feeble and frail woman, would come on quicker, does that move your opinion? No. It does not. No. You do not think she was killed 4 hours before you saw her. I do. You do? Yes. Is that your honest opinion? Yes. You saw her at 10:10. Yes. So if she was alive at 6:30, your opinion's wrong, is it not? Yes. Does not that convince you what a very fallible test rigor mortis is? No, it does not. I am still of the opinion. Do you think the milk boy imagines seeing her alive? I do not want to think about the milk boy and what he saw at all. The defence also puts the doctor into some difficulty. You base your opinion as to the time of death on rigour. Yes, and the cooling of the body. By the way, with regard to the cooling, you didn't take any temperatures, did you? I was not doing the examination. But you did not, in fact. I did not. No temperatures were taken. No. You did know that what was called rectal temperature is generally considered the best test. Yes. That was not done. No, it was not done. I did not do it. With regard to your periodical observation with regard to rigour, which took place every quarter of an hour, would you show me any notes you made? I was simply there by the order of the Chief Constable. Professor McFall was doing the examination. At any rate, you did not take any notes. No, I did not take any notes. On the morning of the fourth day, the judge, Mr. Justice Wright, gave his summing up. We started this wondering why Julia's murder continues to capture the imagination, and I think the judge summed that up in the first few sentences. This murder, I should imagine, must be almost unexampled in the annals of crime. Here you have a murder committed sometime on an evening in January, committed in a populous neighbourhood, and you have that murder so devised and so arranged that nothing remains which would point to anyone as the murderer. and as far as can be ascertained, no motive in any human being, and went on to touch on some specific points. The Macintosh. Here the judge sees two broad possibilities. It was worn by the assailant, or it was worn by Julia. Either of those would explain the presence of the Macintosh, but not the fact that it was burnt. How did it come to be burnt? He wonders if Julia was struck down when stooping over the fire. It may be just when she had lighted it, and that would account for the burning of the skirt and the burning of the Macintosh. If the Macintosh was burned by accident in that way, I found it very difficult to see how it could have been worn by the murderer, unless he overbalanced and fell over the murdered woman. The Macintosh in that way may, or may not, be significant. The blood on the pan. With regard to the little blob of blood on the pan, I think it may be disregarded. Nobody knows how it got there, and it is difficult to see how it has any connection with the murder, because you've heard evidence from two very distinguished scientists who were called for the defence yesterday, and they said the coagulation could scarcely come on in less than an hour after the blood was shed. It could only be connected with the crime if the murderer was in the bathroom an hour after the murder was committed. Time. Now, what time had the prisoner available if he was the murderer? Because this is the most vital part of the case. If you think on the evidence as to fact that the times are so short as to either make it impossible that the prisoner should have done this act, or anyhow make it very improbable, then that would be a very strong element in your conclusion. The judge sees the 6 minutes past 7 at the corner of Lodge Lane and Smithdown Road as the only solid time in the case. He says the prosecution case for time is based solely on Alan Close's time, which he calls reconstructed, because Alan saw a clock and then estimated how long it would take him to do his round, and then calculated the time he arrived at the Wallaces. Time of death. I think I ought to say something about the medical evidence as to the time of death. The medical evidence, you may think, it is purely a matter for you, does not really afford you any guide or assistance in determining when this woman met her death. You have nothing which would enable you to fix the time of death on that evening. Indeed, the evidence is quite consistent with some unknown criminal for some unknown motive having got into the house, executed the murder, and leaving. Murder weapon. The prosecution have called Mrs. Draper, the char lady, who said two things were missing. One is an iron bar, which apparently the prosecution think is more likely to have been used, and the other is a poker, which would have fulfilled the purpose with equal adequacy. But Mrs. Draper was only there last on the 7th of January. Both objects are missing, and he cannot have used both. Then the question arises how he got rid of it within the limit of time available to him, because he must have gone very quickly to the tram, very quickly indeed. There is no place apparently where he could have dropped it on his way. The only possible place between the house and the tram has been combed and the drains searched, and no trace can be found of it. How the murder weapon was disposed of is a mystery. As the final part of his summary, the judge says, if every matter relied on as circumstantial is equally or substantially consistent both with the guilt or the innocence of the prisoner, the multiplication of those instances may not take you any further in coming to a conclusion of guilt. However you regard the matter, the whole crime is so skillfully devised and so skillfully executed, and there is such an absence of any trace to incriminate anybody as to make it very difficult to say, although this is a matter entirely for you, that it can be brought home to anybody in particular. Whatever your surmises or suspicions or prejudices may be, If it is not established to your reasonable satisfaction as a matter of evidence, as a matter of fact, of legal evidence and legal proof, then it is your duty to find the prisoner not guilty. Of course, if you are satisfied, equally it is your duty to find him guilty. The jury retired to consider their verdict at 1:20. An hour and 5 minutes later, they returned. The Clerk of the Assizes: Members of the jury, are you agreed upon your verdict? Yes. Do you find William Herbert Wallace guilty or not guilty? Guilty. You find that William Herbert Wallace is guilty of murder, and that is the verdict of you all? Yes. William Herbert Wallace, you have been convicted of murder upon the verdict of the jury. Do you have anything to say why the sentence of death should not be passed according to law? I am not guilty, that is all. I cannot say more. The judge then spoke. William Herbert Wallace, the jury, after a very careful hearing, have found you guilty of the murder of your wife. For the crime of murder, by law of this country, there is only one sentence, and that sentence I now pass upon you. The sentence of the court upon you is that you be taken from this place to a lawful prison, and thence to a place of execution, and that you be there hanged by the neck until you be dead, and that your body be afterwards buried within the precincts of the prison in which you shall have been last confined before your execution. And may the Lord have mercy on your soul. So that's that then. William killed Julia, and he was condemned to death. I think we've gone further than we intended to. I just wanted to know why people remembered this murder and not the others. And I think it's to do with the chess club and the phone call and the address that didn't exist, and Julia already being dead when William got home. We also mentioned that the case made legal history, and it did. You see, William appealed against his conviction. That wasn't heard here, that was heard at the appeal court in London. But before then, something remarkable happened at Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral. The day before the appeal, special prayers were offered. The Vice Dean wanted the congregation to pray for them that are set by God's mercy to secure the administration of true justice in our land. Particularly this day you shall pray for His Majesty's judges of appeal, that they may be guided in true judgment. And you shall pray for the learned counsels of our sovereign Lord the King, that they be faithful to the Christian injunction of the Apostle Paul. Judge nothing until God brings to light hidden things of darkness and makes manifest the counsels of the heart. And you shall pray for the people of this county Palatine, that their confidence in the fair dealings of their fellow man may be restored, and that truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Finally, you shall pray for all who await the judgment of their fellow man, and commit them to the perfect justice of Almighty God. The appeal started the next day. The barristers were the same as before. The case was heard by 3 judges, including the Lord Chief Justice himself, Lord Hewitt of Bury. No jury in the appeal court, no witnesses. The barristers present their cases. The judges can stop them to ask questions. When the evidence has been presented, the judges make their decision. From reading the manuscript, it sounds like the 3 judges have studied the transcript of the original trial, and they give the impression of knowing it inside out. The appeal took 2 days. It was all very formal, very polite. There's no jury to impress, so there's no purple prose and no impassioned pleas. The defence went first and got straight to the point. The prosecution never sustained the onus of proof. The evidence, if it was consistent with guilt, was also consistent with innocence. But that gives them a problem, and the judges know it. If there was no real evidence, why did you wait until now to say so? Why didn't you mention this at the very start of things in Liverpool? Mr. Oliver explains that the judge in Liverpool would have known all of the evidence and could have thrown the case out if he wanted to, but he didn't. And knowing that, Mr. Oliver didn't want to ask for the case to be thrown out, only for that to be refused in the full view of the jury, because he worried that might damage his client's case. As you read through the transcript, it becomes clear that the prosecution have got a problem. They say that whoever made the phone call killed Julia. So the appeal judge has asked the obvious question: what evidence is there that William made the phone call? Prosecution reply: of course, there is no direct evidence, and there could not be. If a man chooses to make a bogus call upon himself, there never could be any direct evidence except somebody who saw him do it. Appeal judge: I rather felt as you were putting your case that you were assuming that it was he who made the call because of what happened afterwards, and then saying he must be guilty because he put through the call. Prosecution: I do not think so, my lord. Lord Chief Justice: in other words, you use as a step in your argument that which is only consolidated when your argument is complete. Prosecution: I think I accept that, my lord. All the evidence was given. The judges made their decision. They start by saying that three things are obvious. 1. The defence could have asked the judge to throw the case out at the very start, but they didn't. 2. They do not accept any criticism of the judge's summing up, saying that it was fair and accurate. 3. This is a very difficult case. And we'll do this last bit word for word. Suffice it to say that we are not concerned here with suspicion, however grave, or with theories, however ingenious. Section 4 of the Criminal Appeal Act of 1907 provides that the Court of Criminal Appeal shall allow the appeal if they think that the verdict of the jury should be set aside on the ground that it cannot be supported having regard to the evidence. I should like to add that there is not, so far as we can see, any ground for any imputation upon the fairness of the police. But the conclusion at which we have arrived is that the case against the appellant, which we have carefully and anxiously considered and discussed, was not proved with the certainty which is necessary in order to justify a verdict of guilty. And therefore it is our duty to take the course indicated by the section of statute to which I have referred. The result is that this appeal will be allowed and this conviction quashed. William left the court a free man, and legal history was made. That was the first time anybody had ever been found guilty of murder and then had their conviction overturned on the grounds that it was not supported by the evidence. William left the court without a stain on his character, as far as the courts were concerned. Public opinion was divided, and there was a feeling amongst some that he'd got away with murder. His job became difficult. Some clients refused to have anything to do with him, and he was moved to an office job within the Prudential. William had been in ill health for some years, and he died in the winter of 1933. On the 1st of March, he was buried here, secretly with Julia.